Let's check this video out from Braxophone then, shall we? They thought this game would fail. We're talking about Wuthering Waves here. I think a lot of people wanted it to fail rather than thinking it would fail. And I think there's a lot of people now are in the position where they're like, oh, it has failed, which is kind of weird because it's like, what do you get from that? I don't know. But let's see what he's talking about, shall we?
It's the year 2024, and whether you were born before or after video games were actually good, you're probably aware of the issues that plague gaming. Over-monetization, rushing out unfinished products, console exclusivity, and even more issues have become increasingly more prevalent throughout the video game ecosystem. Every now and then you come across a game that's just an absolute gem. It releases without rushed deadlines, microtransactions, and console exclusivity, and believe me, I am so glad to have incredible player experiences like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3. Generally speaking, games that release...
I've still yet to play Baldur's Gate 3. That's going to happen at some point. I've heard nothing but good things. We are going to do it at some point. I've just got to get... I need to give myself a bit of time when we pull off all of the games and or just do it in my free time. I think they're sort of games where I just need to play in my free time. Go and play Baldur's Gate 3. I think that's one that I'll just do off stream and just enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. I don't think it's a game that I want to do on stream, you know? I just don't think I'll enjoy it as much. And I just don't have the time, man. Like, between playing, you know, gacha games that I'm playing at the moment and then deciding whether I'm playing, like, a multiplayer game. I don't think I really want to sit down and do that on stream. I want to enjoy it. I really want to enjoy it and do it off stream.
And are well received by the
experience
community
the whole
will
thing.
Have happy communities, which is one of the major reasons people thought that Wuthering Waves was going to fail. May 22nd, 2024 was when Wuthering Waves, a new anime open world game, would release to many excited and skeptical players. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, Wuthering Waves release was definitely something. There were definitely bugs, a lot of them.
See, I was lucky. You know, I know it happened, but the launch for me was fine, man. I loved getting that free stuff for everybody else having a bad time with the game. It was a good time for me.
But some people literally could not play the game. When I loaded up Wuthering Waves for the first time, I was on brand new, fully up-to-date hardware, so I didn't really have any issues. But some players experienced environments and terrain not loading, FPS drops, memory leaks, and a bunch more things that I can't find video examples of. And when Wuthering Waves sponsored me to talk about the game's newest updates, I specifically told them that they're not off the hook, and that I was going to talk about how bad that launch was. Now, to their credit, I think the response was pretty good. The Wuthering Waves dev team was quick to respond, sending out patch after patch after patch within days, and soon enough,
lots of quality of life updates as well, you know, performance, quality of life updates. They've been really on top of that. You know, there's still questions that I've got in regarding to certain events and certain content that I'd like to see in the game, but I don't think we can be mad at how they've been working on performance and quality of life updates. They've been killing it on that front, really.
Almost all of the issues with actually being able to play and launch the game were pretty much resolved. But to say that everything was fixed would be a long shot. The whole world had their eyes on this launch. Gacha games are a worldwide phenomenon, and everyone was eyes on Wuthering Waves as one of the biggest releases of the year. With high
Was it really? I don't know. I guess globally, maybe it's a bit bigger. I think sometimes as gamers within the gacha space and content creators within the gacha space, I think sometimes we overestimate the scope of the genre. Now, it makes a lot of money, but I think it's still quite a niche, at least in the West anyway. It's a niche genre. I don't think most people within the gaming world really had their eyes on Wuthering Waves. I think that may change as it comes on PlayStation 5. And again, as I say, these games are massive. They are massive. But I don't think we've got to that sort of level yet of the Genshin levels of breaking outside of the gacha niche. You know, that became a game that everybody knew about. You know, the whole world kind of watched that. It wasn't just big within the gacha space. It was big, full stop. I don't think Wuthering Waves has got to that yet, and I don't personally think the launch was at those levels.
Expectations for a game with so much competition in the space, but unfortunately, a lot of the players were lost due to the rocky launch. It's not like players spent $60 on the game and then weren't able to get in but tried again later because that $60 was already spent. Wuthering Waves is a free-to-play game, and most people gave it one try, saw it didn't work, and gave up. Needless to say, the developers of Wuthering Waves and the entire team at Curl Games was probably sweating a little bit. To make it up to players, Wuthering Waves gave out tons of polls, which is a nice gesture, don't get me wrong. They saved me from having to swipe for Cheng Li. But more importantly than that, the sequence of events that took place after Wuthering Waves' launch was evidence that Wuwa development team really wanted people to give the game an honest try.
Yeah, this is one thing I think that's become evident from Kuro, and I know people say you're glazing Kuro, but I think Now, it could be the position they're in the market, and this is how they need to be, but I still think it's something that deserves credit. They seem very transparent. They seem to care. They seem to genuinely care about the game, and not just care about the game themselves and have a passion for it, but have a passion for wanting people to enjoy the experience themselves. They're not just putting a product out there for profit, which of course, that's the primary goal. They want to make money. I'm not naive, of course they do, but they do genuinely seem to really care about what we think of the game. And I think that's a really good thing to see nowadays. They're not telling us what we should be enjoying about the game. They're listening and they're replying. And I think it's really good to see in the industry nowadays. We've got to applaud good acting in this space because there's plenty of bad actors. And I think it definitely deserves credit. Whether you're a fan of the game or not, whether you like other games or you like this game, I think it's a respectable trait for sure.
The perception of Wuthering Waves was super mixed. The players that could play it absolutely loved it. Some players who could play it didn't like it, and a lot of players couldn't play it, so they hated it. And to be honest, would free polls save Wuthering Waves from being a failure? Probably not. I can name
getting it on console is going to be a massive factor for this game because I think the PC audience is probably, now this is just anecdotal, but I just think the PC audience is potentially larger, at least in the West. Probably more likely to spend money just because mechanically how the game is anyway, and then the fact that it doesn't run great on a lot of mobile phones. I know it works a lot better now, but I think when that controller support comes for people on phone, it's going to be a big thing. It's going to be a big thing. And when it drops on PlayStation 5, that's going to be massive as well. I really do think it's going to launch the game up to a next level. Well, I hope it does anyway. As somebody who's a fan, I want to see the game do well.
In probably 20 different gacha games where the content is mid as hell and they try to compensate by just giving everyone gacha currency. Clearly, that's not going to be enough. What came next after all of the launch hiccups was the most surprising thing a lot of new-gen gacha players have seen in their gaming lifetime, which was a series of written updates from Wuthering Waves staff answering questions about bugs, the state of the game, and future updates. If you play other games where the developers are transparent with their communities, this probably isn't new to you. But as someone who's been gaming for 20 years now, I can confirm that transparency in live service games is far from the norm. Sure, you'll get updates here and there, maybe roadmaps, but since the live service model is usually in the interest of making money, you'll mostly see updates to cash shops rather than fixes and improvements.
This is one thing I'll give Valve credit for when it comes to Deadlock. You're seeing updates continuously, and dev notes and update notes, and it's really good to see on a game that's far from launch, has no monetization in it in the mini. They're genuinely trying to get a product shipped that's quality, that's going to capture a big part to the market, because they know when they do that, it's going to potentially be a banger for them and potentially be incredibly profitable. If they can capture a big part of the market within the mobile space and the hero shooter space, it's going to make them tons of cash. And you can tell that getting a good product out is the initial part of getting that. And I understand that profit's the end game, but having a passion for the product itself, it's really good to see.
Requested by players. Now, to be clear, game developers aren't obligated by any means to tell you what they're planning to do. But with the increasing prevalence of live service games, where players sink their money in expecting a long-term investment, it definitely feels important. This sort of communication by Crow Games is really what kept a lot of players around who had started the game during its rough patch. For its rough launch, after they moved the Yinland banner forward, Crow Games brought in a ton of sales, signaling to both the community and the company that Wuthering Waves had a successful launch, despite the major stops along the way. But would Crow Games keep up the generosity and continue to try and improve the game, or was this just a show to get people on their side? Well, then comes the version 1.1 previews, featuring UI updates like layered maps, access to past quest dialogues in the gallery, changes to the chat box to look a lot better. They also added in tuner synthesis, which basically removed the issue players had with some resources being wasted, allowing you to create higher tier tuners with lower tier ones. There were tons of
the tuners went from being the bottleneck to echo materials. XP materials being the bottleneck.
Bugs fixed in 1.0.
So I'm pretty sure everybody's got a ton
fixed up even more
of tuners now.
And introduced a ton of new content into the game, like new zones, new stories, new characters, including my wife. The rule is we're allowed one per game. Weapons, echoes, and more. Version 1.1 was meant as not only a big game update to add more things to do, but also a sort of peace offering for players who may have quit at the start. This was Crow Games' first major attempt to bring in new players and try and win over the players they lost, and they absolutely crushed it. I don't think people understand how much money this is. Something a lot of folks forget when they're looking at a game's success is that it's not about which game in the industry makes the most money. Believe it or not, just because a game doesn't bring in $40 million every single patch doesn't make the game dead. Considering
Thank you. And what people love to do with the revenue chart is always compare a particular game at a particular point to another game at a totally different point. Now, there's games that are just bigger. The Hoyoverse games, for example, of course, they are the big dogs in general that consistently, continually make that cash. To compare new games or smaller dev teams or just smaller titles in general to them consistently on revenue basis, I just think it's unfair. And sometimes games are having slow patches or low patches or they're not exactly desirable banners, and people will compare the revenue to another game that's just had a massive update and be like, well, look at this, that's the game's obviously dead. It's like, you know, we've got to give it a few more months first before we can start to look at some trends regarding revenue, that's for sure. But yeah, again, we don't know the overheads either for Kuro, do we? What 50 million for somebody might not be massive profit. You know, we might be talking 10, 15 million profit. I don't know the monthly outgoings. It'd probably be more than that. But 10 million for somebody else might be 9 million profit. They might be still doing totally fine. It depends on what their outgoings are as well, doesn't it?
Monetization of live service games is ongoing, and the fact that it definitely does not cost $40 million a month to keep the game running.
Exactly.
The game and company are doing crazy well.
Yeah.
Different games all have different levels of success. What many consumers don't understand is that a game isn't failing just because it's not numbers 1 through 10 on a chart. Considering that a majority of the top mobile games are run by multi-billion-dollar corporations, but anyways, that's a whole other tangent. Wuthering Waves had an incredibly successful month after the team had gone out of their way to fix bugs and communicate with the community. Granted, there was also Chengli. The amount of players was slowly and steadily increasing.
I think Shorekeeper and Camellia is going to be another good month for them, another good area of revenue. Well, I hope it is anyway, but I'm suspecting it's going to be. I think a lot of people have been saving for Shorekeeper, and then Camellia, by the looks of it, is going to be following that up. So I'm expecting a lot of people potentially opening the wallets, because I think I might end up having to myself.
With plenty of newbies giving the game a shot now that it was actually playable. You might be thinking, well, Brax, of course they're going to fix the game. That's their job. And I agree, because if they didn't, Kuro Games would be in a lot worse of a position. But there is a difference between doing the bare minimum, as most games do, and going above and beyond to keep a happy community. A great example of this is Final Fantasy XIV, which is known for having a passionate development team that aims to not only create the greatest game possible, but also make sure that the players are happy. Just one example of this is that rather than nerfing certain classes or jobs that are clearly overpowered or overtuned, they bring other jobs up, as they believe it makes players feel worse to take damage away than to just bring everyone else more damage. Now, does that lead to rough balance sometimes?
A rising tide lifts all boats, though. A rising tide lifts all boats.
You can ask the Arcadian tier, but that's something that can always be adjusted for later on. For the time being, the players are really happy with the game, at least most of the ones that I talk to, and myself. The Wuwa team worked hard to make the game not only more playable, but also just easier to play and access with different features that would make the game more convenient to play. But by version 1.2, they introduced a ton.
And we're looking at as well some quality of life updates coming in 1.3 that look great, from quest teleportation to the nearest marker and the nearest beacon to where your quest is, to the synthesis improvements that look like they're going to be coming through the option to batch select echoes for data merge. These are all great little things. Controller support coming, ray tracing. I know that's not for everybody, and I know that's less of a quality of life update and more of a visual improvement, but all these things add up, and they just continually keep rolling out these things. It's awesome to see. These are little things. They're very small on their own, but they add up massively to the overall feeling of goodwill towards the game, don't they?
More game improvements. Not ones that anyone needed by any means, but things that definitely made the player base a lot happier. But as all things do, eventually, Wuthering Waves fell off in monthly revenue a bit. And to be honest, every gacha game fell off around that time, but that's a subject for another video. Whether it's because of the limited character in the first half being one that players
apart from AFK Journey and what was it, Love in Deep Space, they seem to absolutely freaking kill it.
Just weren't super interested in, or because of other external factors that didn't stop Kuro Games from continuing to improve the game based on community feedback. In version 1.2 came new camera lock-on options, a new utility to help players deal with ranged puzzles to not force.
So clutch. This was such a good thing for the range puzzles, but also it makes mining so freaking sweet. One tap mining from a range. It's awesome. It just changes the game in mining as well.
Character switches, a feature to showcase characters to friends and just check out their animations, a new max FPS of 120, improved
Right.
rewards from in-game challenges.
I swear to God, I know it's a placebo, but 120 has made the game look visually better. The fidelity, I mean. And I know that's totally a placebo. And I know the game's going to look better in a way because it's smoother. But I'm telling you, man, I know it's all in my head. But since I've upgraded to 120, the game just looks better. It doesn't just run better, it looks better.
And in my opinion, the best feature of all, wave plate or stamina storage.
Yeah.
To help relieve
Big. Now, this is one thing, though. I'm going to give a massive credit for it, but every gacha game should launch with a stamina storage. If it's going to have a stamina function in the game, it should have a stamina storage off the get-go. I just think it's an application to the game, a mechanic that just respects your time. You know what I mean? And I think they all should have it from the get-go. And I'm glad it's in the game. I just think more games should do this right off the bat.
players of FOMO for not spending their stamina every single day. On top of that, as a gift to the community for their continued support, Girl Games would be giving out Shangli Yao, who's a top-tier DPS, for free.
Yeah,
Considering
insane.
this character's parallels to a certain PGR character, and also his power level, he'd probably sell a fair bit if they didn't.
Dude, I'm wondering, when are the PGR crossovers going to happen? Are they going to happen? You know, there's some really cool characters in PGR. I'd really be happy to see some of those characters come over here.
Give him away for free. So him being free is losing Curl Games a ton of money. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Curl Games and Wuthering Waves are a perfect company and development team. They've had their fair share of hiccups and things that they probably wish they could undo. But what makes Wuthering Waves different from many other modern games, including other gachas, is that the company wants to make money like everyone else. But their approach is very different. Rather than power creep every single character or lock certain content behind new characters, their approach is to improve the player experience by listening to the community feedback when there are clear issues.
Yep. Traversal. Need to say more?
A game for the players. And in my opinion, that's how it should be. Most of us just want to play good games, and though many times the community has pretty terrible takes and feedback that we definitely shouldn't listen to, the most important thing for both the players and the developers is that the game is just good. If an entire community
Well, that's where good developers come in, don't they? You know, us as gamers are really good at pointing out problems. We're not so good at coming up with solutions. You know, we like to think we are, but for the most part, we really think quite selfishly in how things affect us personally, which is fine, but we don't really think in a holistic overall improvement, do we? We think, well, this would make it better for me, but we don't necessarily think about the other 99.9% of players where the developers have to do that. And I think we're really good at bringing up the problems, and we can all agree with that. Not so much the solutions.
says that a game needs to change and it doesn't change, usually that game just loses its passionate players like many other live services. Even though Wuthering Waves lost a ton of possible players at the start of the game, it's rare to see a team care so much about making the game good at any cost, and that's why I'm a believer that Wuthering Waves will be around and continue to grow as time goes on. Because
I hope so. I think the PlayStation launch is going to be a massive factor of this. I think there's a lot of people on mobile who have a console who are waiting for that. There's probably a lot of people on mobile now who are waiting to have a better input method rather than using the touchscreen, because that's just, I don't know how people do that on this game. It just blows me away. So I think it's gonna be massive. Well, I hope I'm not underestimating it or overestimating it, should I say. But there's a lot of people who come through my comment sections and my videos and my streams who are talking about, well, I've played the game on mobile, but I really, you know, my phone feels like it's going to melt. I can't run it properly. I'm just waiting for it to drop on PlayStation 5. I think it's going to be massive, and hopefully it is as well.
as a player of a live service game that's going to be constantly and ever changing, there is no better feeling than having your voice actually matter. Having a huge amount of casual players is definitely how you get your game more on the radar of other players and continue to grow and make money as a company. But even if the most passionate and dedicated players aren't the ones bringing you the most money, they are going to be the ones that continue to play the game. And so
I think as well, with the regions being a bit more balanced in terms of income, I think it's really good for us in the West that we actually get listened to as a global audience, where games that have heavy percentages of the revenue coming from China gets prioritized, which makes sense. I don't begrudge companies doing that. They're going to listen to the biggest cash cows at the end of the day, aren't they? But I like the fact that this game definitely seems like it's a bit more balanced. Global seems to match up with China a little bit more. That's good to see, because that means then that us as international regions, Europe, North America, wherever, are going to get listened to a little bit more as well, which, you know, that's a big thing for me. And I hope that continues. I hope it stays kind of level as we go up and China doesn't dwarf the rest of the revenue and they get prioritized consistently over us as well.
Many developers in other live service games seem to have forgotten that, but so far from an outside perspective, it looks like Kuro Games hasn't, and that's why I think this game is far from dead. It's got a long ways to go before that happens. Let me know what you guys think about Wuthering Waves so far, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Yeah, that was a great video. That was actually, I agree with pretty much everything Brack said in that video. Do you know what? I didn't realise I wasn't subscribed to Brack's phone. We'll have to remedy that. Drop a like as well. I'm pretty sure anybody in the Gacha space knows Brack's phone. Yeah, great video. I agree. I think there's a lot of people who definitely do want to see this game fail, which is really kind of weird. You know, it's weird in any game community when you see a new game come out or even an older game and you want it to fail. I just don't get that. Just let people enjoy the things they enjoy. Me, myself, there's lots of Gacha games that I enjoy across the board. And I really don't understand that attitude where people see it as this newcomer on the block and I'll enjoy seeing it fail because I've seen it myself on when we've talked about revenue, monthly revenue, when we've talked about just different things with Genshin and Wuthering Waves, and some people come in and they seem to take pleasure in seeing the game lower down in the revenue charts, which is just really weird because how does that benefit you as a player at the end of the day unless you're getting improvements on all that money that's being made in your game? Does it affect you? No. Do you care if somebody on the board's just bought a new freaking supercar or bought a new apartment with the money that they've been making? Does that make your game better? No. Wouldn't you rather the game make a little bit less money and get more improvements in the game for you? I'm sure you would. So it's kind of weird because it's a really weird parasocial relationship that people have with corporations, bragging that how much money it's made when it will never affect them at all. Just kind of odd. But yeah, agree with everything he said. I hope it's the case as well. I hope may the success continue and the game continues to grow, and hopefully the PlayStation launch is a banger. Everything's ready to go, and it's a good launch, and we see the game continue to blossom, hopefully. But yeah, guys, check out Brack's phone, show some love. Great video that was, actually. I'm glad I watched that.